The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the endless stretch of highway that cut through the American Southwest. The air was thick with the scent of sagebrush and the faint hum of cicadas, a symphony of nature that seemed to stretch on forever. Inside the dusty SUV, 5 friends were embarking on a journey to escape the monotony of their everyday lives. Jake, the self-appointed leader of the group, gripped the steering wheel with a confident smile, his eyes scanning the horizon for the next adventure. Beside him, Sarah fiddled with the radio, her skepticism about the trip evident in the way she rolled her eyes at Jake, overly enthusiastic commentary. "This is going to be epic," Jake declared, his voice booming over the static of the radio. "Just us, the open road, and whatever mysteries the desert holds." Sarah snorted, adjusting her sunglasses. Mysteries? More like endless sand and questionable gas stations. "I still don't know why I let you talk me into this." From the back seat, Mia leaned forward, her voice soft but insistent. "Come on, Sarah. It's about the experience, the freedom. Don't you feel it?" Sarah glanced back, her expression softening slightly. "I guess. But if we end up lost, I'm blaming Jake." Lucas, sitting quietly by the window, stared out at the passing landscape. His mind seemed elsewhere, lost in thoughts he wasn't ready to share. Ethan, the group's comedian, nudged him playfully. "Hey, Lucas, lighten up. We're on vacation, not a funeral procession." Lucas forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, sorry, just thinking." The SUV rumbled on, the road ahead shimmering in the heat. The desert was a vast, unforgiving expanse, dotted with towering mesas and the occasional derelict gas station that looked like it had unseen a customer in decades. The friends had planned this trip for months, a chance to break free from their routines and explore the unknown. But as the miles stretched on, a subtle tension began to creep into the air. Jake's overbearing nature was starting to grate on Sarah, who preferred a more laid-back approach. Mia, ever the empath, sensed the unease, but couldn't quite put her finger on its source. Lucas's distant demeanor was worrying. And even Ethan's jokes seemed to fall flat against the backdrop of the desolate landscape. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the road, the group decided to stop for the night. They pulled into a small, run-down motel, its neon sign flickering weakly in the twilight. The place was eerily quiet, the only sound the distant howl of a coyote. Inside the motel, the friends gathered in the lobby, which was decorated with faded photographs of the area and a dusty display case filled with mining artifacts. The clerk, an elderly man with a weathered face, handed them their keys with a cryptic smile. "Enjoy your stay," he said, his voice gravelly. "And be careful out there. The desert has a way of playing tricks on the mind." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Tricks? Like what?" The clerk chuckled, a dry rasping sound. "Oh, you know. Mirages, strange lights, voices on the wind. It's easy to get lost if you're not careful." Jake laughed, clapping the clerk on the shoulder. "Don't worry, old man. We've got GPS and plenty of supplies. We'll be fine." But as they settled into their rooms, the clerk's words lingered in their minds. Mia, in particular, felt a chill run down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something was waiting for them out there in the darkness. That night, as the friends lay in their beds, the desert seemed to come alive. The wind whispered through the cracks in the walls, carrying with it the faint sound of pickaxes striking stone. Mia sat up, her heart pounding. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to Sarah, who was already asleep. In the next room, Lucas tossed and turned, his dreams filled with visions of dark tunnels and suffocating darkness. Ethan, unable to sleep, stared out the window, watching as the stars twinkled in the vast empty sky. Only Jake slept soundly, his confidence unshaken. But even he could unignore the strange sensation that crept over him in the dead of night, a feeling that they were not alone. Something ancient and restless was stirring in the heart of the desert. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the friends packed up their belongings and hit the road once more. The motel faded into the distance, but the sense of unease remained, a shadow that followed them as they ventured deeper into the unknown. Little did they know, their journey was about to take a turn into the realm of nightmares, where the line between reality and the supernatural would blur, and the ghosts of the past would rise to claim their due. The sun blazed high above the sprawling desert, its relentless heat shimmering off the asphalt like a mirage. Inside the SUV, the air conditioning hummed, struggling to keep the five friends cool as they cruised through the American Southwest. Jake, ever the confident driver, tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the open road. Sarah, in the passenger seat, scrolled through her phone, her expression a mix of boredom and irritation. Is in the back. Mia gazed out at the endless expanse of sand and rock, her thoughts drifting, while Lucas sat silently, his face shadowed by some unspoken burden. Ethan sprawled across the middle seat, tried to lighten the mood with a bad joke about cacti, but only Mia offered a half-hearted chuckle. Guys, this is what freedom feels like, Jake said, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. No schedules, no deadlines, just us in the desert. Sarah rolled her eyes. Freedom. More like a recipe for sunburn and bad decisions. Remind me why we didn't go to Vegas? Mia leaned forward, her voice gentle. Because we wanted something real, Sarah. Something off the beaten path. Yeah, well, the path's looking pretty beaten to me, Sarah muttered, glancing at the barren landscape. Then, without warning, the GPS beeped frantically, its screen flickering before going blank. Jake frowned, tapping it. Come on, you piece of junk. It was working fine a second ago. Lucas stirred, his voice low. Maybe it's the heat. Or maybe we're too far out. Far out is the point. Jake shot back, undeterred. Let's see where this road takes us. As if on cue, a narrow dirt track appeared on their left. Now that's an adventure. Without waiting for agreement, he turned onto the path, the SUV bouncing over ruts and rocks. Sarah groaned. If we get stuck, I'm not pushing. The road twisted through the desert, flanked by jagged boulders and skeletal Joshua trees. The landscape grew wilder, more desolate, till they crested a low hill and saw it. A cluster of dilapidated buildings nestled in a dry valley below. Wooden shacks leaned precariously, their paint long peeled away. Rusted mining equipment lay scattered like forgotten relics, and a heavy silence hung over the scene, broken only by the faint whistle of wind through broken windows. Holy crap, Ethan said, leaning forward. It's like we drove into a Western movie set, minus the cowboys. Jake parked at the edge of the town, and the group stepped out, stretching their legs. The air was dry, carrying the faint smell of dust and decay. A faded sign, half buried in the sand, read "Welcome to Silver Creek." The letters were barely legible, eroded by time and weather. Lucas brushed his fingers over the sign, his expression unreadable. Silver Creek, he said softly. Never heard of it. Mia shivered despite the heat. Her arms crossed tightly. This place feels wrong, like something bad happened here, Sarah scoffed, kicking a pebble. It's just an old mining town. They probably ran out of gold or whatever and bailed. Happens all the time. But Mia wasn't convinced. The silence felt alive, pressing against her skin like an unseen presence. She kept quiet, not wanting to sound paranoid. Jake, camera in hand, was already striding toward the nearest building, a crumbling general store with a sagging porch. This is awesome, he called. Let's explore. Maybe we'll find some cool stuff to post online. Ethan grinned, following him. Bet there's a haunted saloon or something. I'm calling dibs on any ghost whiskey. Sarah sighed, but trailed after them, muttering about tetanus risks. Mia and Lucas hesitated, exchanging a glance. You feel it too, don't you? Mia asked quietly. Lucas nodded, his jaw tight. Yeah, but Jake won't listen. They wandered through the town, its emptiness both fascinating and unsettling. The streets were lined with rotting structures, a blacksmith shop with a rusted anvil, a boarding house with broken shutters, and a sealed mine entrance boarded up with splintered planks. Old pickaxes and shovels lay abandoned, their handles weathered to splinters. Mia paused by a pile of mining tools, her hand hovering over a dented helmet. For a moment, the world seemed to shift. She saw darkness, heard muffled screams, felt the weight of earth collapsing. She gasped, pulling her hand back, her heart racing. "You okay?" Lucas asked, his voice sharp with concern. I don't know, Mia said, shaking her head. "I thought I saw something." Sarah, overhearing, laughed. "You're as bad as Ethan with his ghost stories." "Good. It's just junk." But Lucas wasn't so sure. In a nearby shack, he found a tattered journal, its pages brittle and stained. The entries described the daily grind of the miners, their hopes for wealth, and then, toward the end, cryptic warnings, shadows moving in the tunnels, whispers in the dark. The final page was scrawled in frantic handwriting. The mine took them. It's not empty. He snapped the journal shut, his pulse quickening. "Guys, we should go," he said, his voice urgent. Jake, snapping photos of a faded poster for a mining company, waved him off. "Relax, man. This place is gold for content." As the sun sank, casting long shadows across the town, the group gathered by the SUV. Jake turned the key, but the engine only sputtered, then died. He tried again, his brow furrowing. "What the hell?" Sarah crossed her arms. "Great. Stranded in Creepsville." Mia glanced at the darkening streets, a chill creeping up her spine. "Maybe we can fix it in the morning?" Ethan forced a grin. "Guess we're camping then. Who's up for a ghost story?" But as night fell, the desert grew unnaturally quiet. The wind carried a faint, rhythmic clink like pickaxes striking stone. Shadows seemed to shift in the corners of their vision, and the air grew heavy with the weight of something watching, waiting. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the ghost town of Silver Creek in a blanket of shadow. The group of friends stood in the center of the main street, the eerie silence pressing in on them. The abandoned buildings loomed like silent sentinels, their broken windows and sagging roofs giving the impression of a place long forgotten by time. The air, once warm from the desert sun, now carried a chill that seemed to seep into their bones. Jake, ever the optimist, tried to shake off the growing unease. "All right, let's make the best of this," he said, clapping his hands together. "Can set up camp in one of these buildings. Maybe the old saloon looks sturdy enough." Sarah crossed her arms, her skepticism clear. "Sturdy, it looks like it could collapse any second. And who knows what's living in there, rats, snakes, or worse." Mia, her voice barely above a whisper, added, "Or something else." Lucas, who had been unusually quiet, glanced at her. "What do you mean?" Mia hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing. Just, this place gives me the creeps." Ethan, trying to lighten the mood, grinned. "Come on, guys. It's an adventure. Think of the stories we'll tell when we get back." But as they made their way toward the saloon, the sense of being watched grew stronger. The wind picked up, whistling through the gaps in the buildings, carrying with it faint, indistinct murmurs. Mia stopped, her eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Sarah asked, her tone sharp. "It sounded like—" "Voices," Mia said, her gaze darting around the empty street. Jake chuckled, though it sounded forced. "Probably just the wind. Old towns like this are full of weird noises." But Mia wasn't convinced. She could swear she heard words, fragments of sentences, pleas for help, or perhaps warnings. The others seemed oblivious, but the whispers lingered in her mind, growing louder with each step. Inside the saloon, the air was thick with dust and the faint smell of rot. The floorboards creaked underfoot, and cobwebs clung to the corners. An old bar stretched along one wall, its surface scarred and stained. Behind it, a cracked mirror reflected their flashlight beams, distorting their faces into ghostly apparitions. "This place is a dump," Sarah muttered, kicking at a broken chair. Lucas, exploring the back of the room, called out, "Hey, check this out." He pointed to a faded photograph on the wall, its frame warped with age. The image showed a group of miners, their faces grim and tired, standing in front of the mine entrance. "Silver Creek Mining Company, 1892, Ethan read from the caption. Looks like they had a rough time. Mia approached the photo, her fingers brushing the glass. As she did, a sudden chill ran through her, and the room seemed to darken. For a split second, she saw the miners' faces change, their eyes hollow, their mouths open in silent screams. She gasped, stumbling back. "You okay?" Lucas asked, steadying her. I saw something," Mia stammered. "In the photo, their faces." Sarah rolled her eyes. "You're just spooking yourself. It's an old picture, nothing more." But Mia knew what she saw. The vision had been brief but vivid, and it left her shaken. She kept her thoughts to herself, not wanting to alarm the others further. As night fell, the group set up their sleeping bags on the saloon floor. The only sounds, the occasional creak of the building settling. But sleep was elusive. Mia lay awake, listening to the whispers that seemed to grow louder in the darkness. She could almost make out words now: trapped, help us, betrayed. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from upstairs, followed by the sound of footsteps. Everyone sat up, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. "What was that?" Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. Jake grabbed his flashlight and stood. "It's probably just an animal. I'll go check." Mia grabbed his arm. "Don't, please." But Jake shook her off. "We can't just sit here. Come on, Ethan, let's take a look." Reluctantly, Ethan followed, and the two disappeared up the rickety stairs. The others waited in tense silence, the minutes stretching into an eternity. Finally, Jake and Ethan returned, their faces pale. "Nothing up there," Jake said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Just empty rooms." But Mia noticed the way Ethan avoided her gaze, his hand shaking slightly. She knew they had seen something, even if they wouldn't admit it. As the night wore on, the whispers grew more insistent, and the temperature dropped further. Mia huddled in her sleeping bag, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that the town was alive, that the spirits of the miners were restless, and that they were not welcome here. In the early hours of the morning, just before dawn, Mia awoke to a new sound, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like the sound of pickaxes striking stone. She sat up, her heart pounding, and saw that the others were still asleep. The tapping grew louder, more urgent, and then from the corner of her eye, she saw a shadow moving across the wall. Its form indistinct, but unmistakably human. She opened her mouth to scream, but the shadow vanished, leaving only the echo of the tapping in her ears. Mia lay back down, her body trembling. She knew now that Silver Creek was not just a ghost town. It was a place haunted by the past, and the spirits were awakening.
Ow.
As the first light of dawn crept through the broken windows, Mia made a silent vow. They had to leave this place, and soon, before the ghosts of Silver Creek claimed them as their own. Darkness enveloped Silver Creek, the ghost town now a maze of shadows under a starless sky. The five friends huddled inside the old saloon, their flashlights casting jittery beams across the dusty floor. The unsettling events of the night, the whispers, the fleeting shadows. Mia's vision of the miners' screams had left them rattled. The air inside felt heavy, colder than it should have been, as if the walls themselves were breathing unease. Their only plan was to survive until dawn, but the town seemed to have other intentions. Jake paced near the barricaded door, his usual confidence fraying. He'd tried the SUV again before nightfall, but the engine remained lifeless, as if something had drained its spark. "We'll fix it in the morning," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "For now, we stay put and keep calm." Sarah gripped a rusty poker she'd found by the fireplace, her knuckles white. "Calm, after what we heard?" "Those whispers weren't the wind, Jake." Mia sat cross-legged on the floor, her face pale. "It's more than whispers. I saw something when I touched that helmet. Men trapped underground, screaming as the rocks fell. They died here, and they're still angry." Lucas, leaning against the bar, stared at the cracked mirror behind it. Its reflection looked wrong, too gaunt, too still. "Maybe they want us to know," he said quietly. "Or maybe they want us to pay." Ethan tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. "Pay for what? We're just passing through." Before anyone could answer, a low, grinding sound echoed from outside like metal scraping against stone. The group froze, their flashlights converging on the windows. Through the grime-streaked glass, they saw them figures in tattered miners' uniforms. Their faces hollow, eyes glowing with a sickly yellow light. Pickaxes hung from their hands, dragging across the ground, leaving trails in the dust. Sarah stumbled back. "What the hell are those?" Mia's voice trembled. "The miners? They're not just ghosts. They're hunting us. The figures moved closer, their steps slow and deliberate. The whispers returned, louder now, a cacophony of overlapping voices, accusing, pleading, enraged. Words like betrayed, greed, and ours filled the air, pressing against the friends' minds like a physical force. Jake grabbed a broken chair leg, brandishing it like a club. "Stay back from the windows. We'll hold them off." But the saloon itself seemed to turn against them. The floorboards creaked violently, as if something beneath was clawing its way up. A sudden gust of icy wind swept through the room, extinguishing their fire and plunging them into near darkness. Ethan's flashlight flickered, then died, leaving only Jake's and Mia's to cut through the gloom, and then it began personal nightmares tailored to each of them. Jake blinked, and the saloon vanished. He stood in a dark tunnel, the walls closing in. Faces emerged from the shadows people he'd let down, their eyes accusing. "You failed us," they hissed. "You'll fail them too." He swung his chair leg, but it passed through empty air, and he was back in the saloon, gasping, his heart pounding. Sarah clutched her poker as the room warped around her. A miner appeared, its skeletal hand brushing her face, cold as death. "You can't deny us," it rasped, its voice piercing her skepticism. She screamed, swinging wildly, but hit nothing. Tears streamed down her face as her rational world crumbled. Mia collapsed, overwhelmed by visions of the cavern. She felt the miners despaired, their lungs choking, their hands clawing at unyielding rock. "Help us," they begged, their voices a tidal wave in her mind. She curled into a ball, sobbing, unable to shut them out. Lucas's vision took him to a rain-soaked alley, a figure from his past lying broken on the ground. "You ran," it accused, rising with bloodied hands. His guilt surged, paralyzing him until the saloon snapped back, leaving him trembling against the wall. Ethan's grin faded as the miners surrounded him, their faces twisting into grotesque masks. A child's voice, his sister's, whispered, "You left me alone." His humor, his shield shattered, and he sank to the floor, shaking defenseless against the terror. The group staggered back together, their personal hauntings leaving them raw. Outside, the miners pressed closer, their pickaxes tapping a relentless rhythm. The saloon walls groaned, dust raining from the ceiling as if the building were alive. "They're not just ghosts," Lucas said, his voice hoarse. "They're angry." "Something happened. Hera betrayal." Mia nodded, wiping her eyes. "I saw it. A cavern. They were left to die because someone wanted more profit." Jake clenched his fists. "Then what do they want from us? We didn't do this?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Maybe they don't care. Maybe we're just here." The tapping grew louder, the miners' glowing eyes unblinking through the windows. The whispers became a single, chilling promise. "You belong to us now." Mia clutched the miner's helmet she'd found, her fingers trembling. "We need to find out what happened. Maybe there's a way to stop this." Jake nodded, his resolve hardening despite his fear. "We'll search the saloon. There's got to be something. Records anything. But we stay together." As they moved deeper into the saloon, the shadows seemed to writhe, and the air grew colder still. The miners outside didn't advance, but their presence was a constant threat. A reminder that Silver Creek was no longer just a ghost town, it was a trap, and the friends were its prey. The saloon in Silver Creek had become a fortress under siege, its walls trembling as the ghostly miners pressed closer. The 5 friends, Jake, Sarah, Mia, Lucas, and he thinks clustered in the center of the room, their flashlights flickering as if drained by the oppressive darkness. The air was thick with cold, and the faint smell of earth and rust, as if the mine itself had seeped into the building. Outside, the miners' glowing eyes pierced the night, their pickaxes tapping a relentless rhythm against the ground, a countdown to something inevitable. Jake gripped his makeshift club, a broken chair leg, his knuckles white. "We can't just wait for them to come in," he said, his voice steady, despite the fear in his eyes. "We need to find something, anything that tells us how to stop this." Mia clutched the miner's helmet she'd found, her fingers tracing its dented surface. "I keep seeing it," she whispered. "The cave-in. They're trapped, angry. They want justice." Sarah, her poker raised like a shield, snapped, "Justice. From us. We didn't do anything to them." Lucas, his face pale, pointed to a trapdoor behind the bar. "Maybe there's something down there. Records journals, something that explains what happened." Ethan, his usual humor gone, nodded. Better than sitting here waiting to die. The group pried open the trap door, its hinges screaming as they revealed a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air that wafted up was damp, heavy with the scent of mold and something metallic. Mia hesitated, her visions of the cave-in flashing through her mind screams, collapsing earth, suffocating blackness. But Jake's determined look pushed her forward, and they descended together, their flashlights barely piercing the gloom. The basement was a cramped, dirt-walled space, cluttered with crates and rusted mining tools. Cobwebs draped the ceiling, and the floor was uneven, as if carved directly from the earth. In one corner, a stack of papers mouldered on a splintered table. Lucas grabbed them, his hands shaking as he sifted through faded ledgers and letters. "Look at this," he said, holding up a yellow document. It's a report from 1892. The mine owner, Elias Hawthorne, ignored safety warnings to cut costs. The foreman knew the tunnels were unstable, but pushed the workers anyway. There was a collapse, dozens died. Mia's breath caught. "That's what I saw. They were betrayed." Sarah's eyes widened as she scanned another letter. "It says the foreman, Caleb Reed, survived. The workers cursed him as they died, blaming him for their fate." Before they could read more, the basement shook violently, dust raining from the ceiling. A low guttural moan echoed through the walls, followed by the sound of wood splintering above. The miners were breaking through. "We're out of time," Jake shouted, shoving the papers into his backpack. "Back upstairs now." They scrambled up the stairs, emerging into the saloon just as the barricaded door buckled. Shadowy figures poured in, their tattered uniforms hanging off skeletal frames, their glowing eyes locked on the group. Pickaxes swung, narrowly missing Ethan as he dove behind the bar. Sarah swung her poker, but it passed through the nearest miner like smoke, the creature's laughter chilling her to the bone. Mia clutched the helmet tighter, a sudden clarity cutting through her fear. "They want Red," she said. "4 men, he's the key. They're tied to him." Lucas nodded, his voice urgent. "Maybe we can use that. If we find something of his, we could, I don't know, appease them." Jake grabbed a crate from the basement, smashing it open to reveal more mining gear. Among the tools was a tarnished pocket watch, engraved with the initials CR. "This has to be his," he said, holding it up. The miners paused, their glowing eyes fixing on the watch. For a moment, the air grew still, the whispers softening. But then a new figure emerged from the shadows, taller, broader, its face a twisted mask of rage. Its eyes burned brighter, and its voice boomed, shaking the walls. "Can't free us," it roared, its words dripping with venom. "You're ours." The saloon erupted into chaos. Tables overturned, glass shattered, and spectral hands clawed at the group. Jake swung his club, keeping the miners at bay, while Sarah and Ethan dragged a heavy cabinet to block the door. Mia, clutching the watch, felt another vision read abandoning his men, their screams echoing as he fled. "He left them to die," she gasped. "They want him to pay." Lucas's face grim, grabbed a lantern from the floor. "Then we give them what they want. We burn his watch, break his hold." Ethan hesitated, his voice trembling. "What if it makes them angrier?" "We don't have a choice," Sarah said, her skepticism replaced by raw fear. Mia tossed the watch into the fireplace, and Lucas lit a match, the flames catching quickly. The miners shrieked, their forms flickering as the watch melted. The towering figure, the foreman's spirit, lunged forward, its claws grazing Jake's arm before it dissolved into smoke. The other miners wavered, their glowing eyes dimming, but the saloon still shook, as if the town itself resisted. "We're not done," Mia said, her voice shaking. "There's something else holding them here." The group backed against the wall, their flashlights flickering as the remaining miners regrouped. The air grew colder, the whispers rising into a furious chant. Hours. 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 Dawn was still hours away. And the friends realized they weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their souls. The saloon in Silver Creek trembled, as if the earth itself were rebelling. The air was thick with the stench of damp earth and decay. The flickering light of the friends' remaining flashlights cast erratic shadows across the splintered walls. Jake, Sarah, Mia, Lucas, and Ethan stood back to back, their makeshift weapons chair legs. A poker, a broken bottle clutched tightly. The miners' spirits, though weakened by the destruction of the foreman's watch, still lingered, their glowing eyes glaring through the shattered windows. The whispers had coalesced into a single, chilling refrain. Ours forever. Mia clutched the miner's helmet, her hands shaking as fragments of her vision swirled in her mind screams. The collapsing tunnels, and the foreman's betrayal. "It's not enough," she said, her voice barely audible over the creaking wood. "Burning the watch hurt them, but the foreman's spirit is still here. It's anchoring them." Jake, blood trickling from a gash on his arm, nodded grimly. "Then we find it. Whatever's left of him, we destroy it." Sarah, her face streaked with dust and tears, gripped her poker. "And how do we do that?" "This place is falling apart, and those things aren't giving up." Lucas, his eyes haunted, pointed to the trap door leading to the basement. "The answer's down there. I saw something in those papers, a ritual, something about returning what was taken." Ethan, his usual bravado shattered, shook his head. "You're crazy. We go down there, we're done for." But before they could argue, the saloon doors exploded inward, splinters flying. The towering figure of the foreman's spirit emerged, its form more solid now, a grotesque parody of a man. Its eyes burned with a fiery intensity, and its tattered coat billowed as if caught in an unseen wind. It raised a massive pickaxe, the blade gleaming with an unnatural light. "You cannot break us," it roared, its voice shaking the walls. "This town is ours." The miners surged forward, their skeletal hands clawing at the air. Jake swung his chair leg, knocking one back, but it reformed instantly, its laughter cold and mocking. Sarah stabbed with her poker, her movements frantic, while Ethan hurled his bottle, which shattered harmlessly against a miner's chest. Mia and Lucas ducked behind the bar, scrambling for the trapdoor. "We have to get to the basement," Mia shouted, pulling Lucas with her. The others followed, dodging spectral claws as they descended the rickety stairs. The basement was darker now, the air so cold it burned their lungs. The walls pulsed, as if the earth were alive with rage. On the table, among the scattered papers, Mia spotted a small, tarnished locket, half buried in dust. She grabbed it, her fingers trembling as she opened it. Inside was a faded photograph of a man stern, with cold eyes and the initials CR etched on the back. "This is it," she said. "The foreman's. It's what's holding him here." The basement shook violently, and the foreman's spirit appeared at the foot of the stairs, its pickaxe raised. Jake charged, slamming his shoulder into the figure, but it barely flinched, swatting him aside like a rag doll. He hit the wall with a sickening thud, slumping to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. "Jake," Sarah screamed, rushing to his side. He groaned, struggling to rise, his face pale. "Go," he rasped. "Finish it." Mia, tears streaming down her face, clutched the locket. "The ritual, it said we have to burn his anchor in the heart of the mine." Lucas grabbed a lantern from the floor, its flame weak but steady. "The mine entrance is outside. We'll have to run for it." The group stumbled up the stairs, the foreman's spirit in pursuit, its roars shaking the saloon. The miners blocked the door, their glowing eyes unyielding, but Jake, with a final surge of strength, threw himself at them, clearing a path. "Go," he yelled, his voice breaking. Sarah sobbed but ran, followed by Mia, Lucas, and Ethan. They sprinted through the street, the miners' claws grazing their backs, until they reached the sealed mine entrance. Lucas pried the boards loose, revealing a yawning black tunnel. Mia tossed the locket inside and Lucas lit a match, throwing it after. Flames erupted, consuming the locket, and a deafening wail filled the air. The foreman's spirit appeared, its form unraveling as the fire spread. The miners' figures flickered, their glowing eyes dimming, then vanished. The ground trembled one last time, then stilled. The town was silent. The survivors stumbled back to the street, their breaths ragged. Jake was gone, his sacrifice buying them the time they needed. Dawn broke, painting the sky a soft pink, and the SUV roared to life, as if released from a spell. They climbed in, too exhausted to speak, and drove away, the town fading into the desert haze. As they reached the highway, Sarah stared out the window, her hands shaking. Ethan sat in silence, his face hollow. Mia clutched the miner's helmet, unable to let it go. Lucas drove, his eyes fixed on the road, but his lips moved faintly. Humming a tune none of them recognized, a slow, mournful melody the miners had sung in her visions. Mia's heart sank. She glanced at Lucas, his eyes flickering with a strange, distant light. Had they truly escaped, or had they brought something with them? The desert stretched endlessly ahead, and for the first time, she feared the open road.